What is up, everybody? Welcome back to Deciphering Dynasty. Little bit of a hiatus. It is my fault. Don't blame Leo. It's this man right here. But we are back. We're gonna have some fun. We had the NFL mock draft or the real draft. I've been saying mock so many times in my life the last couple weeks. We're back. We had the NFL draft. We know landing spots. So what we decided to do is we're gonna dive into a rookie draft, a 24 rookie draft. We're gonna just alternate picks here, talk about them. But again, what we like to do on this, we're not clickbaity. We're not just going to sell you, hey, hit that like button. We're going to be talking about strategy. We're going to be talking about kind of deep diving into that deciphering dynasty. We're hearing a lot of things out there in terms of like, oh, you could draft this player and wait, or just wait for this guy to come back, not have a big year next year. So we're gonna be looking into that. Like, hey, what do we expect from these guys? We pulled fake cards here. Who's gonna go first? I'm gonna let my elder go first. Leo can make the first selection, and then we're gonna work through the first 2 rounds in this mock. And if you're watching at home, you're watching YouTube, hit that like, leave a comment as we kind of work through it. But this is super flex, tight end premium. We'll say 1.75. We'll make it a little bit more than 1.50. And then we'll say 12 team super flex where you can start 2 quarterbacks. So Leo's on the board. Where are you going, Leo, at the 101?
I'm going with the obvious pick. I'm taking Caleb. I think he's a no-brainer in Superflex at the 1 spot. Yeah. And I mean, just from value for quarterback. And then the other piece you look at is what have the Bears done, right? Historically, when was the last time you were excited about a Bears offense? It's been a while. But the fact that they've got DJ Moore, the fact that they got Keenan Allen, the fact that they, Cole Kmet, and they got a running game, and all of the pieces they've put into play have really set Caleb up for probably the best, first year potentially that we've seen for a quarterback, just as far as weapons around him. To me, 1-1 is a no-brainer. You have to go Caleb, and he's already in a top 8 position, probably in a startup, even as a rookie. So invest, get him at 1-1, and it's a done deal.
Yeah, he's QB8 for me right now in Dynasty. That's pretty good. And he could easily be higher than that as soon as, week 4 next week when he goes off and in that offense. There is no other quarterback. I can't remember. You might have a better memory than me, but I can't think of a quarterback that got drafted, with the number 1 pick or a top 10 pick that's in a better situation than Caleb Williams right now. That team is absolutely built around him. And he knows it too. I think the biggest, maybe the one thing you could say is like, he knows that the pressure is really there, right? Like some of these other guys come in, Stroud came in with not that pressure of like, oh yeah, you have everything in front of you. People are a little worried about that. Now, Caleb, this is it for you, buddy. You got all the stuff around you. You have to kind of build out from there. I have the second pick. I'll just go chalk. It's easy. I'll take Marvin Harrison Jr. off the board. I love this spot for him. I talked about it in the rookie guide that I did. Essentially, he's earning all those targets. I think it's an underrated Arizona offense that you have to love there. I love Kyler Murray in that standpoint. We talked about Kyler before in the last couple months about him being a buy, and now look at them building around him there. To me, this is a very clear 2, like tier Caleb, Marvin. I have not seen anything else but these 2 at the top. Have you seen anything else out there?
No, I haven't. I mean, there was a lot of talk pre-draft about Neighbors potentially being the second pick off or Jaden being the second pick in a rookie draft. And bottom line, it's really been those 2 guys across the board from everything that I've seen play out.
Yeah, remember the Neighbors as wide receiver 1? That went very quick as he's getting thrown the football by Chaniel Jones or whatever he called him. That went out of the way. I did see some Drew Lock puff pieces, which I'm excited about. My Drew Lock love is back, so maybe we'll get some Drew Lock targets in there. All right, 103 tier break. Remember, this is super flex, tight end premium. Where are you leaning at 103?
So the tempting thing to do, because it's super flex, is to lean into one of the 2 quarterbacks that are still out there that are in that top tier. So context wise, that would matter for me in a super flex. If I was drafting and I had a really weak quarterback 2 on a super flex squad, I would be tempted to lean into that quarterback position. But if I'm drafting in a vacuum and I'm going for who I think is going to have the best trajectory, is going to come out of the gate strong as a target hog, even in a bad offense with, Daniel Jones, I'm going to go with Neighbors as my 3rd pick. Okay. And the reason I do that again is because I do think that this offense hasn't had a field stretcher like Neighbors since that new regime got there. And last year out of the gate, the offensive line was just decimated. I really think that this is going to give them an opportunity to stretch the field. And Neighbors is a special wide receiver. And in a vacuum, I would rather have that, even though I'm tempted to lean into the super flex value at quarterback, because I think that's real, right? That matters. But in a vacuum, I want to have Neighbors because I do think he is, he's the second wide receiver in this class that in any other class in the last 8 years would probably be, the number one. So,
Yeah.
So I'm going to lean into Neighbors here and settle in.
Yeah, and Tim brings up a good point. You love the wide receivers you guys chose. Hard to be passed on QBs. Again, it really comes down roster dependent. If you need that QB, sometimes you got to go get it. And that is the other thing too. So, I've talked about this a lot where it's like, hey, best player available, you go with it. That's really what Neighbors is at. Your best player available, you go with it there. But if you really truly need that QB too, and you're sitting there and you believe that Jaden's still a top 5 guy and he's in there, love it. You okay? Hey, I'm going to take this guy at 103 because you don't know if you trade back 1 or 2 spots if he's going to be there. Maybe the guy coming up for that quarterback. And it really is dependent on that. Like I get questions all the time. My first thing is a 10-man 12 or 14? Because if anything over 10, the quarterbacks get definitely more value. 12 is a little bit iffy. You can play with it a little bit. You can have value at different spots and different positions. But 14, 16, you're taking the quarterback. I'm taking the quarterback every time in that scenario, especially just when there is that limited supply out there at that position. So, and in 10 team, I tend to just take position play. If I'm pretty set at the QB position, if there's value there, I don't mind just taking, wide receiver heavy. So I get it 100% there. But to me, I have to take Marvin Harrison over these quarterbacks. You could take some of the quarterbacks. That's fine. But I think there is an argument between Neighbors and one of these guys, depending on your roster build. But I love the talent. I love the talent that's there. All right, let us go. Now I'm here. Of course, now I got to take the quarterback because he left it for me. So Jaden on the board, Drake, Roman Dunze. Man, I keep going back and forth with Jaden Daniels and Drake May. I'll be honest, part of me thinks that Drake May is the better quarterback. When you're looking at all of that, like, I've watched these guys for years. From a fantasy perspective, though, it's hard for me not to take Jaden Daniels. So I'm going to take him here. I do have question marks about Jaden. I think that, like we've shared before when we've talked about these guys on the show, to me, Jaden is an ultimate ceiling and ultimate floor guy because he can really bottom out. Like there's definitely opportunities for him to do that. Washington is slowly kind of built around him. I like this team build a little bit. They have the weapons where New England doesn't. And remember pre-draft, I was talking to you. I was like, man, whoever gets quarterback in New England, I'm sorry. I know you live up there. I'm kind of out because I just don't necessarily see where their build is going, where their team build is going. Weapons. Now, I love what they did with Jalen Polk. I really like Polk there. Javon Baker has been fun. I think they've done an okay job in free agency, but Washington's built more around him. And with the rushing upside with Jaden Daniels, I think I lean there, but it could be egg in my face next year, and I should have stuck with my priors and stay with Drake May. But that's where I'm leaning right now. Where will you go if you had this pick?
So if I had that pick, I would have taken May, and I think the reason that's changed for me, because I think we've talked about it on previous shows, and I think I was leaning Jaden coming into the draft. They're so close. I mean, they're different players completely, but I think trajectory and what they bring, they're still going to bring valuable production and have solid quarterback careers, in the NFL. Jaden scares me only from the standpoint, I think it was Josh Norris who said this in one of his podcasts, where he said he's not only the road runner, but he's also Wile E. Coyote at the same time.
Yeah.
And I see that. I mean, you worry about how he runs. He doesn't necessarily protect himself like a Lamar Jackson does with, a stride and getting down and being selective in his runs. He's more like Justin Fields in a sense that he is just putting his head down and he's going, but he doesn't have the physical stature to run like that. So there's some concern, but I mean, he has weapons. I don't think you can really go wrong. Where I would go with May in this particular spot and where I'll take him with the 5th pick overall is, and I think it was Chuck Bass who tweeted this out the other day, where he compared where teams were in 2022 versus where they are in 2024. And he mentioned the Texans and the Titans and the Giants and the Bears and how the rosters have turned over. And I think that the Patriots have shown themselves, and this is where the differentiation comes for me post-draft, is the Patriots, I was shocked that they showed the level of commitment they did to put weapons around May. So that matters, I think, going forward. And if you're going to surround him, if you're going to take the blueprint that a lot of teams are showing right now to say, hey, we've got a young quarterback, we've got to get that quarterback weapons, I think that's a win, and I think the Patriots are heading in the right direction. So for me, again, durability, the fact that May had decent rushing yardage, it's not like he's a statue. He's not Tom Brady from a mobility standpoint. He definitely has lateral movement. He's got some ability to take advantage of space in front of him as it opens up. So I would have been comfortable with May at 4. I'm definitely comfortable with Drake May at 5.
All right, so you're taking Drake May then. That's where you're going there. And I don't mind that. And honestly, I'm a fraud because I have May ahead of Jaden in my rankings. But like I keep going back and forth on that. They're so close that it's like, gosh, the weapons there. I love the system that, I don't love Kingsbury. I'm going to be fair there. But I do love that probably fit Jaden better than when Drake May in New England. Like I think May fits New England well. I think they both went kind of to the spot that probably fit them the best way. And I think it could also come down to this for me. May might be the better quarterback. It might be the better like team-led quarterback there, but Daniels might just be the better fantasy player. I don't know. Like it could just be one of those things like the Justin Fields arc, right? Like where it has those 2 years. You're like, oh my gosh, Jaden Daniels, top 10 guy every year. And then now he's returning kicks for Steelers, right? Like that's just how that works with these quarterbacks in this era there. Is this a tier for you, or do you have Rome sitting in the next tier, or Bowers?
I think Rome's in a tier by himself pretty much after this break. And the only reason he's not in that tier is just because of the added value that comes from Superflex and the quarterbacks. I mean, I like him a lot. And I do think he's just a slight notch below the other two receivers that have come off the board. But for me, because of the quarterback value, I think the next three players that you lump into that tier are Rome, JJ, and Bowers, and they're in that next grouping together to go, probably in the next three spots in some order.
Yeah, and that's where I want to go with. And I'm going to take Brock. I'm going to let you talk about your guy, Rome, because I know you want to talk about kind of the strategy and all that. But in 1.75 tight end premium, I think Bowers is the guy. I'm not afraid of this landing spot. I know I saw some stuff from like Fantasy Points. They were tweeting some things out, talking about like how bad of a landing spot this was. But really Bowers, like when we did the guide, we talked about him. He was basically the slot guy. Like he's in the slot. That's really where he's at. And if he is that, like if he's going to be that wide receiver 2 on this team, I don't love their quarterback situation. I know they tweet out Aiden O'Connell stuff and like Gardner's there. Like that's fine. But I do think Bowers is an elite talent to himself, right? And we were kind of going through this earlier. So me and Jay Stein did a podcast earlier. We were talking about Devy stuff. And if you guys don't know what that is, it's college fantasy football, where you draft college guys. But Bowers was such in a tier of himself. He is the only tight end that's been going in first round of those drafts for years. Like Kyle Pitts was still going in 4th and 5th round, everybody in those type of drafts. That's kind of the different level of Bowers that there are, like a different level of player there. So when you're looking at that from that perspective, then yeah, like 100%, I'm okay with Bowers here. I don't mind the landing spot there. I think he could get peppered in targets. Michael Mayer to me is more of that inline blocking tight end, where he's a hell of a blocking tight end as well. So like from the receiving standpoint, I mean, it hurts Mayer, but it doesn't hurt Bowers. So I'm on the Bowers side here at 106. You could have easily took Rome too. I'm kind of laying it up for you as well. But that's kind of where I lean with those guys.
Yeah, and I love that pick of Bowers there because, we've seen him kind of fall in some of the rookie drafts that I've watched where I've seen, because of the landing spot, there's been some negativity associated with it. And I think you're right. He's going to play the slot. He's going to be split out. He could be the move receiver in a lot of packages. He's going to create unbalanced lines. He's going to create schemes that they're going to be able to utilize him over the middle of the field. I think Jacoby Myers maybe takes a little bit of a hit because of some of the targets that are going to, be fed to Bowers over the middle. But overall, I think that Bowers is a great pick there. And I think any drafter that picks him up, 8, 9, or 10 is really getting a steal at that rate, because that tends to be the range that he slips to from what I've seen early on. I do think that as more and more, so I think I tweeted earlier this week that this is an interesting period or window, because what we see is a lot of volatility in the rankings right out of the gate, because the loud voices, the soapboxes, the megaphones that we see from a lot of different large sites, predominant voices, will narrow the stream down over the course of the next couple of weeks, because they'll start to point out, hey, Bauer shouldn't be falling to 110, or they'll point out values that are inconsistent early on in the first week or two right after the draft. But I think as the voices start to echo off more often, the louder voices start to have a more consistent top 12, that will change. So if you're drafting, say, the end of May or early June, I think there won't be as much randomness to what you're seeing at the back of the first round, the first 2 weeks out of the draft.
Yeah, no, 100%. I saw him go 110 in a league this year, and I feel like that is absolute value. Like if you get 110, if you tell people before the draft you're gonna get Bowers at 110, they would have looked at you like you were crazy, and like there's no way he would fall there. And that's how sometimes we overthink landing spots, I think. And I think that brings up a good point. Yeah, Joe Flacco came off the sofa, fed David Njoku. Tight ends don't need elite quarterbacks. Yeah, and Bowers, I would argue, is a much better talent than Njoku ever was. And you're looking at a situation where Bowers is a wide receiver too. So those are the things I like there. All right, 107. Where are you going, JJ or Rome?
I'm going to take Rome. I'm going to stick with my pattern and in a vac again, context. If I need a quarterback, I don't mind JJ here at all. And, I'll let you wax poetic about, his potential in Minnesota. But so let's talk about Rome for just a second, because I've seen a lot of interactions over the course of the last week where the advice has been, let somebody else draft Rome. He's not going to put up solid numbers in year one, and you'll have an opportunity to trade for him from a frustrated or disappointed manager at the end of the 24 season. So from a strategy point of view, I mean, I get it. That sounds wonderful. If that sounds great. But the bottom line is the person that's investing in Rome, that's making that draft pick, already understands the sunken cost. They already understand that they're on a 2-year, stack window where they're just happy to be able, to have Rome playing with a great young quarterback in Caleb, and is going to be able to take advantage of that. What Keenan Allen, we have no idea if he'll be there in 2025. So, I mean, the bottom line is you're drafting Rome based on talent, trajectory, and future production. You're not expecting the same production that you're going to see from Marvin Harrison or from Malik Neighbors. No. You're just, or even from some of the wide receivers that potentially are going to go later on. You're not going to see that, but you're drafting with that in mind for future state. And that cost is going to be there. No one drafting him is saying, boy, if he doesn't produce 60 catches and 1,000 yards in year one, I'm trading him for a second round pick come September. Or next February or March. It's just not going to happen.
No. And do you think, so I saw the narrative a little bit out there. Is Rome JSN to you or no?
No, he's not. I think he's more talented. I think that he is just built differently. And that's not to say, JSN, I think he has talent too. And I think he's going to have, with each year that goes by, he's going to develop and be more productive. But I think it's apples and oranges simply from the, whether we're talking coaching staffs or philosophies or strategies. I think Rome is just different. And the fact that he's going to build a rapport with Caleb starting week one, that is only going to intensify over the course of the next, 2 seasons. Yeah, I think that's the investment. And I think I think the people that draft him will show that patience. So I think if you want him, you need to get him now, because you're going to be paying full price for him. I mean, let's take a look at Anthony Richardson, right? Granted, quarterback in Superflex, but he played 4 games. And what's he going to, quarterback 7? I mean, bottom line is, when you invest in that and you have an expectation for year 2 or year 3, it is very difficult to come off of that and sell at a discount. Just once you've sunken that cost into that draft pick, you don't want to move off unless you're just completely disappointed in the performance on the field, which is completely different than opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, think about how many Sky Moore owners still have Sky Moore at cost. How many think out there that still have him sitting on their roster right now, saying all we need is that breakout? Like, and I think that's where you're leaning to in there. And yeah, like in the chat, they talked about Keenan Allen is one of the most elite target earners we've seen. Hard to fathom Rome taking anything off his plate. Yeah, this year. But built in, your expectation, any dynasty manager that drafts Rome, is for next year, and whatever he gives you this year is whatever. It's positive. It's like a plus. Hey, okay, hey, you did that. Oh, hey, maybe there's some injuries. Maybe Keenan Allen's hamstring acts up a little bit or whatever, and then now Rome's wide receiver 2 on that roster, and now you really get some production there, and you're not gonna get him cheaper in that instance either. Like, I don't see a scenario where he goes cheaper there. And when you're looking at the 25 class, there's 2 elite wide receivers right now in Ted McMillan from Arizona and Luther Burden from Missouri. After that, I mean, there's a lot of question marks there too, where Rome probably would fit into that, still wide receiver 3 value. So you're not really getting value there as well. So I do think that that there's a possibility in that range. But I agree with you too. I think that you see a lot of those takes out there. Oh, just get them cheaper next year. That doesn't necessarily happen. I'm telling you, Anthony Richardson's not going QB7 in a draft I'm in, buddy. He's going QB4. So he's going even higher for me. But I think that is the part of this, deciphering, like, understanding your league mates too and their tendencies there. But like, I always talk about this. There's fake value that gets talked about a lot out there in Dynasty, because they think like the built-in, Mixon was a good example of that, or some of these other guys that like, they'll be cheaper next year, or these running backs get cheaper. Veteran running backs weren't that cheap this offseason. They really didn't get cheap anymore because of last year. So there's also that narrative of like, hey, how things shift very quickly. Values shift as a whole too, and how we look at values, and even groups, not just players, groups now. And then like, hey, so I guarantee you, those veteran quarterbacks, the Baker Mayfield's types out there that are kind of out there, they're going to be more expensive. You could have got Baker Mayfield for a late 3rd, 4th last year in the offseason. And now, you're looking at him being maybe a solid QB2 in the format. So group values also change, and it dictates a little bit how you draft. All right. 108. I'm taking my boy. So I'll take JJ. I love the spot for him. I mean, everybody knows I'm a Michigan fan. I like where he went. I think it was the perfect spot for a quarterback. If he needs to sit a few games, he can behind Darnold. I don't think there's really any expectations that he needs to start day one. I think he can start though, and I love him in this offense. It's going to be built around him. Him, Jeffrey Jefferson, Jordan Addison. Also, Hawkinson, reports are he's healthy, maybe be coming back a little bit earlier than expected. So gets him back as well. You have to like kind of what they have built around him there. Aaron Jones. 108 is fine for him though. Like 108 is exactly where he's basically going in a lot of the leagues. Not some. There are some truthers that are drafting him a little earlier than that. But I've pretty much seen JJ go at 108 in most of my rookie drafts that I've done already. So that feels like pretty appropriate value for him.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's perfect setup. He's going from a pro style offense from college to a similar offense now, and the weapons and all of it makes perfect sense. And I think he's got a solid trajectory in front of him, and a super flex, this is absolutely where you invest.
I like this one. What is sardine insulated? Least insulated. That's a good one, Spence. I appreciate you, my friend. All right, so that's at 108 in terms of what JJ's at. Rome's sitting there at 107. John just tuned in and he asked, what is the premium in this draft to go to Bowers ahead of Rome? It was 1.75, John. That was there. But I don't think like 1.52. I think I might still lean Bowers there. I talked about his landing spot if you rewind a little bit. All right. So probably a clear tier here. We did have a question though about the 108, so I want to put it up. So for later in the show, but what would it take for you to trade down from the 108? Was offered the idea of going to the 111. So really, to me, the end of tier basically 3 of within the first, like the top tiers is 108. So to me, that's a premium pick. I still look at JJ or Rome or Bowers or whoever is there. If someone wants to move up for Xavier Worthy, possibly, or Brian Thomas Jr., 108 is definitely a premium pick. I would look at it like that. So if I'm moving 3 spots down where I could get pushed out of the Xavier Worthy and Brian Thomas range too, I would need a pretty significant something back, like a significant veteran back, a win now piece, like a run it mid-tier wide receiver too. Like, I'm not just selling that piece for cheap.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely think the tier break adds a ton of value to it. I might try to, if I'm going to trade down 3 spots, I might trade the 1-8 in a future second for the 111 and a future first. To try to flip that, especially if I'm a solid roster and I expect my second to be mid to late. I might add a 25 second to it and try to get a 25 first back for that 3 pick because of the tier break. Normally you wouldn't think that it would be worth that type of value, but the bottom line is there's going to be somebody at that 1-8 in the higher tier that's going to drive that value, and I would capitalize on it as much as possible. If I don't get that value, like, this isn't like, oh, all right, I'll settle for a little less just because it is a bump. This can't be I'm just getting a bump. It has to be I'm getting something worth coming out of that tier.
Yeah, that's where I'm at too. It's not just a bump. Like, that is a tier, and it's you need to value it as that. Like, you really got to go up there and kind of go through it. All right, 109. Where are you leaning here?
Yeah, so this is where it gets tricky, right? I really think because of that tier break, this is where there's a lot of volatility built into the next 4 picks. And I've seen them go, the next 4 players, next 5 players, I've seen them go in any order. And it comes down to need, it comes down to preference, it comes down to like. What I would probably do here, what I'm going to do here for the purposes of the mocks, is I'm going to go with Xavier Worthy.
Yeah.
I do think that Xavier Worthy may ultimately be a better football player than he is for fantasy purposes for what he can do for that Chiefs offense. Mm-hmm. Now, I also think that this is a pick where we're really building similar to Rome, where we're really building for year 2, because again, this is all speculation, my opinion, but what I think is going to happen next year, depending on Rasheed's legal situation, I really think Rice and Kelsey are the main beneficiaries of Worthy and Hollywood, because I do think that while they'll get some shots, they'll get bubble screens, he'll be worked in with some gadgetry, and he'll stretch the field. I think that those 2 guys on the outside are going to really open up the middle for Rice and for Kelsey. And they're the ones who are going to eat next year. But again, Kelsey's he signed a 2-year deal, but how long does he hold up? How does it ultimately? I think you get Worthy, you get him to play in the Chiefs offense, you get him to pair up with Mahomes. And if you're looking at it from a dynasty perspective for 2-3 years, what does that look like? I don't think you're going to get the immediate rewards for year 1, but I do think based on his speed and his overall landing spot that there's value. He's insulated at pick 9.
You and me have been lockstep on Worthy. Pre-draft, we would love him. We said, hey, he's got talent. And like, I see this a lot. He feels like a decoy wide receiver to me. So he could, even if he is a decoy, the talent he has and the game breaking skills that he has, he could still be a Deshaun Jackson 3 for 130 and a touchdown though. Like, that's what I think his ceiling could be. So when you're sitting here at that 109 to 112 mark, I think that's what you have to look for. And to your point, I know Kelsey just signed a 2-year deal. Marquise Brown is probably gone after this year. He's fine, but he's Marquise Brown. But Rice, it's going to be Rice, Worthy, and then Kelsey-ish, old Kelsey, like Tony Gonzalez-esque into career Kelsey. Why can't Xavier Worthy be the solid playmaking guy for Patrick Mahomes? I think that's where the talent is. We have notably been higher on Worthy, though. So, like, a lot of guys, people out there listening, like, that's part of it. Like, that's the area here. And like he talks about here, imagine what really fast wide receiver actually catching Mahomes' ball behind the defense for a change. That's Worthy. Yeah, that is Worthy's upside and ceiling. And you know what? Like, there's a lot of these wide receivers in the back end. They found some, like, they found some pretty good, quarterbacks to pair with. Lawrence, Herbert, some of these guys. Even then, like Patrick Mahomes with Xavier Worthy. Like that to me is just a perfect. We've been talking about this. This is one of the rare instances where we've been talking about it for a couple of years. Like, man, well, could you imagine him in the Chiefs offense? And he landed there. And now everybody's double like, wait, like kind of thinking to themselves. But yeah, 109 to me is Worthy in that spot too. That's why I have him in my rankings. 110 gets interesting because I'm probably going to get canceled, but I'm not taking Brian Thomas. Okay. I'm taking Ladd. I'm taking my guy, Ladd McConkey. Yep. And I know that they just signed the carcass of DJ Chark out there, and I love DJ Chark. And, obviously that room is, Quentin Johnston's there. Josh Palmer is there. And they're going to go, obviously, heavy run. That's going to be their scheme. But Ladd fits Herbert perfectly, especially with the new defenses. When we've seen that cover 2 being so prevalent now in the NFL, Ladd is perfect. I like him paired with him. I'm not sold on Brian Thomas Jr. in terms of that offense with Lawrence. I get that it's a perfect landing spot, but everybody was all hi-ho on Calvin Ridley last year too. And then look what happened. It just did not pan out. And I don't know necessarily if it's an offensive thing. I don't really trust Trent Baalke to build around them, and that offensive line still needs help there. The Chargers really addressed that. They have one of the best offensive lines now, really, with Joe Alt being there, going to solidify that room. I think McConkey's just going to earn targets. So at 110 in PPR, I'll take the shot on him.
Yeah, I almost took Ladd instead of Worthy. I mean, it was that close. Okay. And I do think that Ladd fits perfectly there. You hear Harbaugh talk about him, the fact that he can run such precise routes, and it's exactly what they need in that offense. And there is a ton of targets. There's a ton of just refined perfection that Ladd has in the routes that he runs. I think even if they don't throw the ball as often as some of the more prolific offenses, even if they focus on running the ball, there's going to be targets. He's going to be proficient. He's going to have productivity. I like it. And he would have been, like I said, I debated him at 9, certainly the pick at 10. 11's interesting, but I'm going to go with Brian Thomas. And even though you said some negative stuff about him, and I agree with that. I mean, you're right. I think any of the receivers or any of the players you're looking at, and then from 9 through, the middle of the second round, there's risk baked in. You can focus on the positive, you can focus on the negative. It's what's going to drive you to like a certain player or shy away from a certain player. Yeah. And in this particular instance, I think Lawrence showed what he could do with big-bodied receivers when he was at Clemson, and I think this is his first real big, high point, box out, body frame wide receiver that even though he may not have a super diverse or refined route tree, I still think he is going to, drive targets, and he is going to be exactly what Lawrence is looking for. So even though there's some question marks with that offense and where he fits and what it looks like, I think that that's a great pairing, and I think they will bring the best out of both players being together.
I agree. I think sitting here in the back end of the first, 111 is good for Brian Thomas Jr. And I wanted to bring this up too. So in one of the leagues I'm in, the guy that took Brian Thomas Jr. grabbed him, and I know he wasn't really sold on him, but he flipped him. He added a couple of extra assets, but not big assets like Eckler and like a third for Bryce Young. So later after the draft, and they flipped him for there because he needed a QB2. And, he had Kyler as his QB1, and he really needed a QB2. So he used Brian Thomas to flip him for a guy like Bryce, which I think is a good strategy too. Like not necessarily the pick, but after the draft too, it's like, oh, well, hey, I have Brian Thomas. My bad. I lost that too. All right. Now on here, this is actually a good question as I fix my mic, and I'll let you answer it. Who would you rather have, Bryce Young or JJ McCarthy? Where are you leaning at there?
I think they're close. Obviously, that's why you're asking the question. I think that I would probably go JJ. And the reason I say that is because Bryce having a year under his belt again, I believe he's having a bounce back year. I think the Panthers are doing everything to put the right players around him. I like the direction they're going in, but if he struggles again this year, he's not insulated anymore in trade value. Where
Yeah.
JJ, I think you still have this first year that if he struggles, rookie quarterbacks that tend to struggle still tend to have some value baked in, and you can get off of them and you could trade for value if you need to. So I think the runway's a little longer with JJ, and the weapons obviously having, Jefferson there and Addison and what that looks like. You already went through it when you drafted him, what that offense looks like. I think, in a vacuum, I would rather have JJ. But I certainly think there's a discussion to be had, because I do think the Panthers are making the right moves for what they need to surround Bryce with in order to make some solid progress in year 2.
Yeah, and I think that's where I lean to. JJ, year 1 has more value moving in. Bryce could be a solid, Bryce's upside's QB 12 to 15, hopefully, where JJ's probably in that range right now. So, hey, you're moving on. You had that value baked in, where Bryce is still valued. He had a horrible, I can't see JJ having the type of year Bryce Young have. I just can't see that. So even then, you're still looking at a quarterback that's going to hold his value pretty high. Sitting here at the back end of the first is tough. If you need a running back, you go after. I'm going to stick to the board. I'm going to stick to my board. But if you need a running back, this is exactly where I would take one. But I'm not going to tell you which one. I don't want to tip any picks here. But I'm going to lean with a guy that I've been going back and forth on all year. But damn it, he landed in a good spot. And I'm taking Coleman. Also, love his videos. Dude's got character. And I'm old and dad. And I love that about him, his ability to kind of make fun of himself and have fun there. But you know what? The Gabe Davis stuff is nonsense to me. He is not fancy Gabe Davis. He's not Stephon Diggs either. So he's not that's very wide spectrum there. To me, he's in a perfect spot. They love him there. He's going to be tied with Josh Allen, just like Worthy is tied with Mahomes. They have one guy to bake in that value. I know Curtis Samuel and everything's there, but they have Kincaid. Yes. But Kincaid, he had a good year last year. It wasn't great. Keon could come in and really kind of produce this year and back into the first. If you're a contending team and have Coleman, I think it's fair to draft him in this spot, especially that wide receiver position based on the value. I like the targets. I like everything there. It's going to be interesting to see where they line him up and where he's going to be at in terms of his offensive alignment. But give me Coleman at the back end of the first.
I like it. I think that's right around where he should go in the, either that pick or the next one. What I like about it and where my head would be at, even if I wasn't a believer necessarily in his ability to separate, because that's his biggest question mark. Can he, sometimes he looks better actually off the line of scrimmage than he does deeper in the route, simply because he loses any separation he gains at the start of the play. He loses it the longer the route he runs. But if he does start fast, right? Because if you're not a believer and you think that separation is an issue, if he starts fast because of the vacated targets, because he's got a good quarterback, because they scheme him in early, you potentially have an opportunity to move off of him if he starts out of the gate fast. Again, because of being a rookie wide receiver and without much competition for targets, he potentially could come out of the gates fast. Mm-hmm. And if that happens, you potentially have an opportunity then. If you're not a believer, if you're a believer, you keep him. But if you're not a believer, this is a great place to grab him, because you potentially could then flip him and gain something that you're more interested in at the beginning of next season.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think you can't always do that. And then you look at the veterans, you can flip them there. Hey, a rebuilding team. Hey, I could build around Keon. Kind of reminds me of maybe Pickens value, kind of how he was in that first couple of years there, where maybe Keon kind of can equal that value as well. So that's the first round. We got Caleb, Marvin, Malik, Jane Daniels, May, Bowers, Ndunze, McCarthy, Worthy, McConkey, Brian Thomas, and Keon Coleman. No running backs taken in that first round, which I've seen. I've seen it happen in multiple drafts that I'm in. No running backs have been taken there. Really, where you get those running backs and those that tier 2 or 3 maybe of quarterbacks is in these first 5-6 picks here. So we're gonna go through the second round too, a little bit less, probably just not as deep dive. We'll probably deep dive on a few guys, but just kind of look at it here. So you're at the 201. Are you taking the first running back, or where are you leaning?
I'm not. Now I'm going to double down on the super flex, and I'm going to go with Bo Nix.
All right.
And the reason I'm going to go with Bo Nix over any of the other quarterbacks that are on the board is simply because he's going to have opportunity. There is no way Sean Payton is not, I mean, he's hitching his wagon. This is his guy, and he's going to put him in a position to succeed. And when you look at the numbers, even if you take away screen passes, even if you take away some of the underneath stuff at Oregon, Nick still had good numbers. He still was prolific through production at Oregon, and he's going to have every opportunity to succeed. And in Superflex, that's half the battle. If you have, there's been a lot of debate. What do you do with, say, Penix? I don't want to talk too much about him because we haven't gotten to him yet. But bottom line, if you have a Superflex quarterback and you have a roster clogger that isn't going to get out and isn't going to get reps, I mean, that can be a momentum vampire, and that can simply kind of derail your positive trajectory. But if you have a quarterback that's going to see the field, that's going to be on the field, well, you have a trade asset from day one that is capitalizing on opportunity. And so for me, the fact that he's going to get the reps, he's going to be put in every position to succeed, and it's super flex, and the value that's associated with quarterback, for me, it's a no-brainer at 2-1.
Yeah, no, I don't mind that. I took him really early. I'm not going to say where because I feel really embarrassed by where I had to take him because I needed a QB2 in a league. But no, it was at 110. So I did take him at 110. But quarterbacks went heavy in this draft I was in. JJ went actually 105. This is how heavy the quarterbacks went in value, 6-point passing touchdown. And I was sitting there and I did not have a QB2. And because of that, I had to reach a little bit. But the way I looked at it is I have a contending roster. Bo's going to have production this year. And okay, I can play with it this year. I could have done the Brian Thomas thing for Bryce or whatever the case may be. But in this league, the way it works, and I know how hard it is to trade for QBs, it's like, you know what? I'm going to kind of reach up. I'm just going to grab him here. And I finished third in this league last year. So my idea is, hey, I have that 2-year window. And part of me also thinks that Sean Payton is, he has such an ego. He's not going to, he wants this to work. Like, he thinks he could turn Bo Nix to Drew Brees. He's going to have that. So part of me thinks that there is some built-in kind of value for at least 2 years, right? That's all I'm looking for him. Like, hey, he can have that there. I am not taking Michael Penix Jr. I want to see how far he falls here. But I'm going to take Trey Benson. So when I'm looking at Trey at the 202, him and Jonathan Brooks to me are very close back and forth. Like, you could take Jonathan Brooks. I'm okay with that. I think he's in Dave Canale's offense, which made Rachaad White look like a top 5 guy. To me, I talked about Arizona being a fun landing spot before the draft for a running back. Benson goes, gets the capital, is a 3-down guy in Drew Petzing's offense. Is going to be very, very, it has been underrated the last year. And then this year they look to go heavy run. They love play action. Benson can also be a receiver. I am not afraid of James Conner in whatsoever fashion at all. And he has not consistently stayed healthy his entire career. I think you're looking at Benson possibly being that guy like week 9, 10, where in redraft people are grabbing him. So give me Trey Benson there in that late second or early second.
Yeah, I like it. And if you're going to swing for a running back, he's definitely talent-wise, opportunity-wise, landing spot, it all lines up. I mean, it's either him or it's the guy I'm going to pick next. Yeah, the guy I'm going to pick next is Jonathan Brooks, right? And again, we're talking landing spot, we're talking potential opportunity, and we're talking about the fact that all indications are that he's going to be cleared for contact early July. So if that's the case, I mean, he's going to hit the ground, running fairly well. And again, I think it's a win situation. They're doing all the right things in Carolina. Probably the only thing that is still a deterrent is the owner that they have. Other than that, everything else they seem to be doing seems to be lining up and putting that offense in a position to actually take a step forward after as bad as it looked last year. So Brooks would be my pick there.
All right, next. All right. You know what? What I'm going to do is I'm going to take Michael Penix Jr. The reason why, Superflex, top 10 draft capital. And I think that if you're going to take the argument for Michael Penix being in this range is like, listen, you're looking at Atlanta, that Kirk contract. Why I think it was a terrible pick by Atlanta because I don't love the team build. I don't like what they were trying to do there. Realistically, it's a 2-year contract for Cousins. You're going to sit there for 2 years. It's not like a Jordan Love type deal, unless Cousins balls out. If Cousins balls out, they have a really good season next 2 years, and yeah, you are looking at that. But best realistic possibility for Michael Penix Jr. if you draft him in the second round is, hey, you know what? He has top 10 capital. the GM's job is tied to Michael Penix Jr. Now that is it. Like, this is it for him. If he's not good, he's gone. So he's going to have the value there. He's going to probably, at some point, year 3-4 start, or possibly sooner. So remember, this is best case scenario, that Kirk Cousins just isn't the same guy. He's injured, coming off to the Achilles, whatever the case may be. And now he gets out there, and now you surround him with like Kyle Pitts, Drake London, Bijan Robinson. Then he's exciting. Like, then you're like, oh, well, maybe he has value now. And immediately his value shoots up. If Cousins misses any time because of injury or anything like that, because of the weapons around him and the system there, from that Rams system coming over, I think that, mid-second is okay to draft him there in that value.
Yeah, I agree. It's difficult because anytime the quarterback is on your bench, again, it really depends on roster size. What does that look like? It can really sap momentum from your roster if you're not getting any productivity. But I do think you're right. I do think, especially with Kirk Cousins coming off such a debilitating injury, even with positive reports. I mean, that's a tough injury to come back from. He wasn't mobile to begin with. Opportunity potentially could be there sooner than we think. Weapons are there. It is a confounding situation, right? What is that? I get it. I understand why they took him. I understand, having that quarterback on the back burner ready to go. What does that look like? But it's still just, it's just difficult to understand that investment at that point, that level of value. It's tough, but I think at this place in a rookie draft, I think it makes a ton of sense. I mean, think about it. If in 2 years you have the starting quarterback and you got him with a second round pick, that's wonderful. Mm-hmm. You did great in your draft. So I think that's a great place to swing. The bottom line is from here on out, there is a ton of variance. There's a ton of inconsistency. There's 5 guys right now that I could pick and I would be comfortable with picking in this next spot and being okay. I think what I would try to do if I was doing this rookie draft is, at this point, I would trade back if I could, because there's 5 players here that I'd be comfortable with. So if I move from 2.5 down to 2.10 and I get an extra third rounder, especially with the depth of this class, if I could get a late third rounder to take another swing at somebody, I would probably do it, because I'd feel just as comfortable moving back those 5 spots, and I'd let other people, make the decision for me at this point, because I'm conflicted as to which direction I want to go in at 2.5. But all that being said, picking here, I would probably take Purcell, just because I think that with the 49ers, even though he's not going to be productive right out of the gate unless we see a Deebo Samuel trade over the course of the next, few months, and potentially, though, heading into 2025, there's going to be an opportunity for him to, absorb a major role if they decide to either move on from one of their 2 wide receivers. And he's a wide receiver that he's borderline, right? Is he slot, or can he play multiple positions? And I think he's right on the cusp of that wide receiver, that physicality, size, speed. He could potentially, be multifaceted in how they use him. And he's not just a slot receiver going forward.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think that's again like kind of the Michael Penix Jr. argument. If something happens ahead of them, immediate value bump, right? Like, and you're like, hey, yeah, he's there, and he could be that guy for you. It gets gross after this. Let's be real. Like at 206 to this range of 212, it gets kind of pick your poison here. I don't want to be the guy that just drafts all the running backs. That's not always a good thing on this one. So I'll go wide receiver. I'm gonna go Xavier Leggett, and I think, you know what, to me, wide receiver 2 for Carolina. I love the positionless offense with Dave Canales, what they have there, the scheme. I think Deontay and him make a very good 1-2 punch. Adam Thielen as well being there. I think Thielen's best days are behind him. Doesn't mean he's not gonna not score those touchdowns that he does. or in targets there, but they went up with a plan with Xavier, this system, and everybody's going to make the Jonathan Mingo thing. Everybody's going to make the Terrace Marshall thing, but this is a different coaching staff. Maybe when you're looking at it from that perspective, they have a plan for Xavier Leggett. It wasn't just, oh, that's the best guy available there for us. So I'll take him here at 206. I don't love it, but based on landing spot, based on my belief in that offense, I'll take him here.
Yeah, actually, that's the other wide receiver I was debating,
Okay.
And for basically the same reasons, that you explained very well. I think that he's definitely worth a shot at this point, and I like what they're doing in Carolina, and targets will be there, and he'll be able to grow with Bryce, and I think that it's a good fit. He offers something a little different than what the other receivers are that are there, and I think it's a good marriage and a good value at that particular position in the rookie draft.
Yeah,
but you're right, it does get pretty rough, and I guess if I'm going to go next, so I'm debating two wide receivers. I'm probably going to go with Mitchell and the Colts.
Okay.
And the reason I'm going to do that is because I had him ranked a little higher, even pre-draft, but I do think it's a good fit. And even though Pittman dominates targets, I love the combination of the quarterback wide receiver there. He doesn't have to be Pittman, right? He can come in and he can be a complementary piece, and he excels in the red zone, which will, open things up to some degree, especially because they're not super strong at tight end with that roster. And I love the fact that Reggie Wayne is the wide receiver coach for that team. And I think if there's anybody out there who can really help refine and get energy and focus out of him, I think that Reggie's a good coach to be able to do that.
Yeah, no, I like AD Mitchell there. I like his value. If you like that offense and what they're able to accomplish there, that system, he's a fine pick at 207 there. I'm not gonna go wide receiver, so I'll let you pick the wide receiver that you were debating with there. Whatever. I'm taking Jalen Wright. I'm going my guy. I've loved this guy for the pre-draft process. He went to a perfect spot that fits his skill set. You want speed? You go to Miami, baby. That's where you go. Unless you're OBJ. The signing today was kind of weird. But Jalen Wright being there, you love. I think that he finds himself into a room where he could be a lead back in that room if there's some injuries ahead of him. I know Devon Chan is there, but at 208, you're really looking for a guy that could have fine opportunity, can hold volume there. So I'm a big fan of Jalen Wright sitting there at the 208.
Yeah, I like it. I like it a lot. I think that, especially because of the injury history in that room and the fact that, they're super productive. That running back room can be super productive, but is that a factor from the talent in the room, or is it the scheme? Is it the fact that they have so much speed that it's impossible to scheme for defensively? So all in all, it's a great fit for Wright, and I think they'll utilize him. And even though he may not, come out of the room week one dominating a lion's share of the carries, I think that as the season progresses, he will take more and more and more. And by the end of the season, it could easily be, a pretty even split if all three of them are healthy. And more than likely that won't be the case, and Wright will have an opportunity for even more of that share from that running back group. So I like it. Good pick there. I'm going to go next pick. I'm going to go with Polk for New England. And again, it's just fit, right? There's not a lot of offense there. I think he fits exactly what they're looking for. I think he has a very high floor. He may not have as high a ceiling as some of the other wide receivers that we've talked about, but I think his floor is consistent. I think he's going to be able to put up numbers in that offense, and building that rapport with Drake May right out of the gate is going to be important. So I like that.
Yeah, no, I think I like Polk. I like that fit that they had there. I think that he was one of my favorite guys. I comped him to Tyler Boyd last year, heading into the Devy Royale stuff that we do for our Patreon. I talked to him. I was like, man, he kind of like this Tyler Boyd. I mean, he fits that role. I mean, I would not shock me to see Polk be a guy that you're like, oh, he's been in the league for 8 years. Maybe he's never be a wide receiver 1, but he can very be valuable wide receiver 2/3, plug in PPR leagues, and you're excited about him there. And him paired with Drake is a good spot. That's good. He fits Drake May's skill set. You know, big body guy, can go up and make catches, do the type of things that you like to see from him. You have to like that mindset there. At 210, I'm going to take Roman Wilson from Pittsburgh, wide receiver. Thinking her targets there. Again, him and George Pickens being there, I think that's a good fit. I think that offense is kind of getting reshaped a little bit. He does all the little things there. Roman's all across the board and where you can get him value-wise. You know, I've seen it from 210 all the way to 310, to be honest with you. But I like him here. I like the spot. Again, wide receiver heavy. You just kind of go and hoping he finds targets.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, obviously some concern over what the quarterback room is going to look like coming out of the season. Is it going to be Russ? Is it going to be Fields? What does that ultimately look like? But bottom line, either one is going to be able to get the ball to Wilson over the middle of the field. And I think they'll utilize him. And I think he'll be, and we've seen that even though Pittsburgh's offense has not been prolific, they still take advantage of the weapons that they have. And I think that Wilson, especially at this point, is definitely worth the dart throw and a good pick at that spot.
Yep. All right, last pick of the night. Where are you going?
I'm going to avoid running back for the whole night because, I did take Brooks, so I took one. But I'm going to take tight end. I'm going to go Ben Sinnott with Commanders out of K-State. Just opportunity. We're talking 1.75 tight end. So, I like him there. I think this is when you shoot your shot for, a tight end that could potentially be somebody that develops and has productivity and is, he's certainly not in the same conversation as Bowers or, Kyle Pitts or Laporta or some of the other talented tight ends that have come out, but he's consistent. He's solid. He's able to play in line and he can play slot to some degree. And there's a lot of things that he can do offensively in that offense. And again, being paired with a young quarterback in that offense, I think that it's a good fit and worth the swing at this point of the draft.
Yeah, no, I agree. I like that. That was probably going to be my pick here, but you said take a swing. So we're taking a swing. I'm taking Troy Franklin. So I'm going to go Troy here. Yeah, if he would have got picked 3 picks before this, we wouldn't even be talking about this nonsense that we're hearing there. I think he landed a fine spot. I think he compliments Sutton well if he's there. Him and Bo Nix, I mean, that's something to think about. Like, they have a good connection there. This offense fits him pretty well with what he tries to do. Franklin's honestly going all over the place. Like, I wouldn't draft him before this, but I don't mind drafting at 212 and on. Like, if you believe in the talent, you believe he's there, because Franklin's fall wasn't like people were drafting. Remember, people were drafting Kayshon Boutte last year, even after he fell, even after all of the stuff that happened with that guy. In like 206, I saw him go. And then now people are like, oh, you can't draft Franklin. Franklin didn't have any of that stuff going on, the nonsense off the field, and didn't want to play and do that stuff. For whatever reason, he fell a little bit, but I still think he found himself a good opportunity. I know analytically, he actually performs well. Jay talks about his analytical profile all the time, and he's like, hey, I really like this guy. So if Jay's telling me analytically still in a 4th round guy still is a good profile and a receiving profile, he's worth a chance, I will take the chance on him, and I'll take a chance with Troy Franklin at the 212.
Yeah, I think that's a great pick. And I think the controversy really comes down to what have we learned from a strategy and investment point of view over the course of the last couple of years with wide receivers. I mean, what I've learned over time is that draft capital really matters, right? There was a point in time in my career in this industry where I didn't care, where I felt like I knew more than the evaluators that were doing this, for the NFL evaluators who were doing this for a living, because I would stick with my own evals or my own rankings. And I would say, you guys are wrong, I'm right. And I would make that investment. And I had him as a 1st round, potentially end of the 1st round, early 2nd round in the NFL draft. So if that's the case, I'm going to stick with it. And I'm going to draft him where you took Coleman. I'm going to take him at 112, and I'm going to, ride or die with that. And Amon-Ra St. Brown and Puka are outliers. They're not the norm. I mean, I'm stating what's obvious, but too many people think that they're better than NFL evaluators. And again, it was a lesson I learned the hard way. So now I think that's a great spot for him, right? He's paired up with his college quarterback. He's on an offense with opportunity. He's got a good offensive head coach who understands what scheme should look like and how he can utilize certain players. It's a great fit. It's worth the swing at that point, but understanding what was the investment cost. So you're going into it saying, hey, I might have had him ranked as a first round potential wide receiver. He's not, because the NFL told me he wasn't, but he's definitely worth the investment at 212. It just would be completely incorrect from a process point of view if you still took him at 111 or 112.
Yeah, 100%. Like, you can't do that, but you can kind of look at it from a perspective of like 212 on. Yeah, I know the draft capital says, and you also have to, I love Troy Franklin, but we have to be ready for, of course. All these guys can provide heartbreak out there. I like this question here. So that's the first 2 rounds. He says, since you're not going, running a whole draft, like, who do you guys like late? Like your pick 48. To me, it's always been Rasheen Ali for the Ravens. I think that he found himself in a really good spot. He was injured, so obviously that's why he didn't get drafted. If you can get Ali late, that's fine. I do think late round, I think JJ Zachariason has talked about him already, so that means he's going to get like a 1-round bump. But I like Ali late if you can still get him there.
Yeah, I agree. I saw that gave you some crap over not taking
Corum, my guy, Blake Corum.
That's funny. Which again, if you were to take him in the second round, you know what? There's no faulting that. There's no faulting that at all. These from 2-4 on, it's a complete crapshoot. You know who I like late? I mean, obviously, there's a couple darlings that everybody's talking about. I like Luke McCaffrey. I think that he's a good late round swing. Somebody worth investing in. Deeper in the draft. I think he's got opportunity. He's got talent. He's got toughness. I like a lot about his game. So he would probably be my dart throw.
Yeah, I like him. If you want a deep guy, someone who I think could take over, not like obviously be Kelsey, but someone that is value. Jared Wiley. I love that tight end out of TCU. I think, landing out there, Cleveland is a good spot. Kansas City is a great spot for him moving forward. So that's our 2-round mock in terms of value. Remember what we talked about with strategies and our thoughts there in terms of that. 109. Remember, 108 is really that tier, so value it like that. 109, moving on. To me, it's a first. If I can try to get a first back for those picks, or just maneuver a little bit, that's really where I would go there. But you're really looking at like that value. Think about where Penix is going. Think about where Franklin is going. Roman Wilson and those guys. Any final thoughts on your rookie draft kind of prep, or just your rookie draft thoughts?
Yeah, I think the one thing I would add to all of this, and it kind of ties into all of our other shows, is, we talked a little bit about Rome Odunze and what does that look like. The person that's drafting Rome is really already understanding there's a waiting curve and they're going to have sunken cost and they're not probably going to move off of them after a disappointing year one. But there are managers in your leagues who will move off of rookie players who don't perform, especially if they're expecting a solid performance right out of the gate in year one. And, they have opportunity, they have vacated targets, they have a good quarterback, they have a good offensive scheme, and yet they don't perform. And if you believe in that player, well, then know who that manager is, identify those managers that tend to move off disappointing rookie seasons. And if you still see enough from that player during the rookie year to validate an investment cost, then that's an opportunity to move in. Also, there's managers out there who like to buy, will overpay for rookies right out of the chute that perform, super well, that you think is an aberration. There are some managers out there who will invest, again, more than they should weeks 1 through 4 because of this opportunity that just looks like a flash, that doesn't look like it's sustainable. Understanding those nuances and those behavioral patterns from the other 11 or other 13 members in your leagues, whatever size they are, is important. That's really your easy button. That's really, that's really the key to being able to maneuver and make these deals. It isn't so everyone can identify variance. Everyone can identify who's playing well, who isn't. But if you can identify the managers that react to that, either buy or sell or avoid or invest, if you're able to identify those managers, that's really where the where the value lies in everything that you're doing as far as managing your team.
Yep. All right, man. This is good. This is fun. Good advice going through there. We'll be back in a couple weeks. We appreciate you guys. We'll check you guys then.